What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Dark Ages, but I do need your all's help. Did we ever finish Marvel Overture, where Nightmare basically kills the Marvel Universe? Did we ever finish that? I know we did part 1, but I can't remember if we finished it at all. Let me know down in the comments section. It'd be greatly appreciated, because if we did, then I'm going to make a full story out of it. So here's the thing. This initially picks up, well, really with kind of a fun little moment, before everybody realizes that Tony Stark is essentially missing. And what we end up getting here is basically Johnny Storm using his power to heat a tea kettle and talking to the children, none of whom know who Galactus is, which is weird because he's like, you've never heard of Galactus? And they're like, no, I mean, who's Galactus? And it's kind of like, it's a tea party, man. Spider-Man's like, no, dude, they're kids. They don't need to know about Galactus. They don't need to be concerned with that right now. And so everybody just kind of goes about and continues doing their own thing. But ultimately, of course, you end up having this revelation given to everybody that Tony Stark has disappeared. And Pepper Potts, of course, is the one that helps everybody kind of figure out what's going on, but ultimately, she can only offer so much help. But with X-23, right, Laura Kinney Wolverine, with her being there and her ability to track sense, that's when she realizes right off the bat, this was no accident, that Tony Stark was taken by Mystique. Because as far as Pepper was concerned, it was Steve Rogers. But again, Mystique can duplicate people, so unless you have the kind of senses that X-23 has, that Laura Kinney has, you're never going to actually know that's the case. Now, of course, we also know that Stark was teleported away, and that's essentially when the trail goes cold. And so from that point, it's a conversation between like Doctor Doom and like Lunella Lafayette and Black Panther and all these guys, where it's kind of like, okay, we have to figure out what to do. Now, this is one of the things that I love the most about this story, because as you guys know, I am an avid Apocalypse fan. I'm just a huge Apocalypse fan. I have been ever since X-Men the Animated Series. He was always my favorite villain. I loved seeing episodes with him. The cool thing about this is what you're talking about are people who are incredibly powerful, specifically Doctor Doom, right? He's probably the most powerful person in this room right now, with his ability to manipulate magic, sorcery, alchemy, all kinds of different stuff. And so what he says here is that, like, when it comes to Tony Stark, he's not simply just a means by which they can generate some new form of technology or something like that. He says, like, if Apocalypse has taken Stark, we have to recover him immediately. And when the statement's made, like, I'm surprised to hear you say that kind of thing, ultimately he says, and really Lunella chimes in and says the same thing, that like Tony Stark's mind was built for destruction, right? Like, he's the greatest weapon maker to have ever lived. And so in a lot of ways, it is concern about the power of Apocalypse to a degree, but more so than that, it's the concern for what Tony Stark could end up building for Apocalypse. And that's their biggest concern here. The other part about this is that Tony Stark, as far as Doctor Doom is concerned, is a ticking time bomb. But what's really cool here is what's not said. And it's really the threat that Apocalypse poses. What we end up getting here is really Doctor Doom just kind of being like, we can't rush in and face off against someone like Apocalypse. One, because of the technology that he has at his disposal, right? The kind of things that he's likely engineered out there in Europe. But two, the power that he has. And when it comes to Apocalypse as a villain, he has been portrayed different ways and pretty inconsistently over the years. But whenever he's portrayed at like the peak of his abilities, it is very difficult to kill him. And he is, by all standards of measurement, like an impossible to kill guy, right? A guy that just cannot be readily destroyed. You know, it's just the kind of level of power that he possesses. Remember, he channels celestial technology. And so the crazy thing about this is that with Doctor Doom ultimately stepping in and making this declaration, it's, well, then we have to do something, right? We have to do something about this whole thing. Like, we can't simply rush into this. It's the exact same thing that Black Panther says. And so what they say is like, we need a scout. We need somebody who can get in there, they can see what's going on, and they can get out fast. And so what they end up doing is sending Quicksilver. Now, as a guy who runs at almost 200 miles per hour, he can get in there pretty quickly, right? He can get in there really, really fast, see what's going on, and then get out just as fast. The funny thing about this, and the way that Peter Parker explains it here, is he says the idea was that Quicksilver would be in and out of the base before anyone ever knew he was there, faster than even Apocalypse could detect him. And he could have done just that if it wasn't for what he discovered. And in realizing that Magneto, that his father, is being held captive by Apocalypse and being used as what's in effect an energy source, the first thing he wanted to do was free his father. Now, initially you might look at that and say, okay, well, this is kind of ridiculous, but it's actually not. The history of Quicksilver in terms of how he's been written in Marvel Comics is he's always been reckless. A really good example of this this is a story called Son of M, during the events of House of M. And I don't know if we ever covered this, and if we didn't, we certainly should. But Son of M, it was really more part of Decimation than it was House of M, but it was the aftermath, right? With all these different mutants losing their powers, that what Quicksilver did is he ran to Attilan. He went to the city of Attilan, the Inhuman City, and stole their Terrigen crystals, or at least some of them, and then used them to activate or try to reactivate mutant powers. It was a reckless decision. It wasn't fully thought out, but that's always been the nature of Pietro Maximoff. And so him just kind of racing off to try to rescue his dad and giving no real thought to the bigger picture here is exactly something he would do. And so ultimately, when he tries to approach the device containing Magneto, of course, he's shocked, he's not destroyed. But when the question is like, okay, like, what do we do here? We end up learning that Otto Octavius had actually predicted this. He had predicted that what was going to happen is the heroes were going to send somebody in here to figure out what's going on. And most likely it would be Quicksilver, because he's the only person that could get in here and out fast enough before anybody could even detect that he was there. And so the question that Otto asks is like, should we lock him away with the others? The response of Apocalypse is, no, don't do that. Let's send him back. And so they ultimately put him under the control of the Purple Man. They send him back in there, and when the question is like, Quicksilver, what have you learned? That's when people realize something's not right. And Quicksilver, being able to move at 200 miles per hour, right, 175 technically, being able to move so fast, he literally just kills so many people. He kills Okoye, he kills all these individuals who were here. Not any of like the huge mainstays, but he kills more than a few people. Like, it gets to the point when he actually ends up impaling Johnny Storm, right, to the point where Johnny Storm's injured and can't control his powers. At that point, Jean Grey manages to step in, and what we're told here is it only took Jean Grey a second to reach Quicksilver's mind, but in that second, he had already done so much damage. But she basically shuts his mind down, but in that moment, literally Johnny Storm is going haywire. He can't keep his power contained. He can't control it. And that's when he tells him, you have to leave. And the response of Susan Storm is, no, I'm not going anywhere, right? You're my brother. I'm not leaving you. I'm staying here. Because as far as she's concerned, she's seemingly lost everything else, right? Franklin's gone, Reed's gone, all that kind of stuff. It's literally just her and it's just Johnny. And that's basically it. There's really nothing else there for them. And so in that moment, of course, she casts her force field. Johnny Storm ends up exploding, basically ends up dying in the process. And that's it, right? It's this massive weight of guilt that she has hanging over her that she couldn't save her own brother. And even more so than that, the guilt weighs over her that she couldn't save Reed, she couldn't save Valeria, she couldn't save Franklin or anything. That as far as she's concerned, she was just a complete and total failure because she couldn't save the people that were closest to her. And so at that point, of course, once Pietro is taken to the hospital and basically is allowed to wake up, because he wasn't operating of his own accord, they can't really punish him here, right? Like literally, he went on a mission they sent him on, and he was overtaken by the Purple Man, who they didn't know operated with Apocalypse. So you can't really fault him too much. And so he ends up, of course, apologizing to Sue and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for all this to happen. And even Jessica Jones comes to his aid and says, like, I know what it's like to have the Purple Man screwing with your head. And so when the question is asked, what did you see there? That's when he starts spilling all the beans. And he's like, they have like a pyramid full of electricity, that they have Magneto in the middle of it. And that's literally when people start putting together, they're building a Faraday cage, right? Which is basically a way to kind of keep the EMP at bay, to sort of keep this electromagnetic pulse from taking out power in that immediate area. But then at that point, he's just like, yeah, I saw Tony Stark, they're basically working on something, and not just Tony Stark, Hank McCoy, Dr. Octopus, Riri Williams, Reed Richards, like they're all working with Apocalypse. And that's when Susan Storm just refuses to believe it, because she's like, there's no way my husband Reed would willingly work with Apocalypse, right? There's no way that would willingly happen. Of course, from our perspective, what we know is that Reed is doing it because he's under the control of the Purple Man. Seemingly everybody else there is, which really begs the question, if Zebediah Killgrave can ensnare all of them, why hasn't Zebediah Killgrave ensnared Apocalypse yet? That's the question that you have to ask here, or has he already done it? And so at this point, what you end up doing is switching that back over to Apocalypse himself, where he's just kind of laying in wait, right? And just having all the experience he has in terms of battle strategy, in terms of all that stuff, he literally just says, like, they're going to be coming, and they're going to try to stop us. And some kind of disembodied person says, like, they're not going to succeed. And so he asks, are the three of you ready? And the response is, yes, we are ready to hunt. In essence, he's talking to like this new symbiote, which is basically bonded to somebody, right? Like this literal modified symbiote, like a 3-in-1 symbiote, which is just crazy. What do you think about it? And so it's nuts to see. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. I can't wait to get to the next one because this one's kind of the slower one. This one and the next one are a little bit slow. And then once you get to, once you get after that, then it all just really starts to blow up. But we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.